The sun-baked city of Muscat, Oman, plays host to the most consequential diplomatic encounter between the United States and Iran in over 3 years. Over 2 days on the weekend, the two adversaries attempt to navigate a labyrinth of mutual distrust, geopolitical posturing, and looming over all of this is the spectre of war. The talks between America and Iran, officially aimed at curbing Iran's rapidly advancing nuclear program, come amid a backdrop of saber-rattling from Washington. There is also a great degree of recalcitrance by Tehran and a regional shadow war involving Iran's proxies, the Houthis and Hamas. The negotiations pit US Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, against Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. But in the run-up to it, both sides publicly sparred over what was the best format to carry forth the negotiations.
We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious.
President Donald Trump insists that the talks are direct, while Iran maintains that they would much rather prefer to engage through an Omani mediator. This is an important technicality for Tehran. It reflects Tehran's reluctance to legitimize Washington unilaterally. This marks the first high-level dialogue between Iran and America since 2022, following months of clandestine messaging through Oman. For the United States, the immediate goal is to halt Iran's uranium enrichment, which has reached 60% purity. That is just a hair's breadth away from the 90% purity which is required for weapons-grade uranium. Iran currently possesses enough 60% enriched uranium to produce at least 6 nuclear bombs if they are further processed. The previous Biden administration had revived the JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, but it collapsed soon after Trump's re-election. Trump had pulled out of the P5+1 negotiations in his first term in 2018. It resulted in the Iran nuclear deal. Trump had called it the worst deal negotiated ever. Now Trump is demanding a sweeping new agreement that will dismantle Iran's nuclear program, restrict its ballistic missiles, and also at the same time cut off its support for proxies like Hezbollah and Houthis, all of which are extremely tall asks. Iran, meanwhile, is seeking relief from the sanctions regime and also a guarantee against any further military strikes by America. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has repeatedly rejected direct talks with America, calling them neither wise nor honorable. Add to that, the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, just before the talks, emphasized that Iran's nuclear advancement is an irreversible process, which means there is no question of suspending the contentious nuclear program. Trump's approach blends what are his maximalist demands with very volatile public rhetoric. Earlier this month, he announced, taking many by surprise, that there would be direct talks between America and Iran in Oman. In the same breath, he also said he will be welcoming Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House for the second time in his second term. Days later, he warned that Israel would be the leader of a military strike on Iran if diplomacy were to fail. And then just moments later, he contradicted himself. This erratic messaging from Trump underscores a deliberate strategy by the US president to try and keep Tehran off balance. The American president has also simultaneously escalated pressure on Iran's regional network. Since the 15th of March, the United States has conducted multiple and intense airstrikes against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. That is the last Iranian proxy that is capable of daily attacks. In fact, one of those operations by America on the Houthi rebels got leaked to a journalist after he was inadvertently added in a close security group by one of Trump's top national security aides. Trump has also claimed that the main missile man of the Houthis was killed in those American airstrikes. Trump has also greenlit Israeli operations against both Hamas and Hezbollah, almost giving a blank check to Israel to eliminate these two terror groups. By crippling Tehran's axis of resistance, Trump is hoping to weaken Tehran's bargaining leverage at the talks in Oman. And yet, Trump's tactics have a serious risk of backfiring. The Houthi campaign has galvanized an anti-American sentiment in the wider region. Iran's Supreme National Security Council has vowed severe retaliation against America and even said that US bases will be under threat in the region. The Houthis control a lot of commercial shipping lanes along the Red Sea, and that has become increasingly dangerous for global commerce. But that is the lesser of America's problems with Iran. The big one is still around Iran's contentious nuclear program. Iran's nuclear program has advanced dramatically since Trump withdrew from the JCPOA in 2018. At that time, the deal limited Tehran to just under 4% of uranium enrichment. It also capped its stockpile at 300 kilograms. Today, Iran operates over 6,000 centrifuges, including advanced models like the IR-6. It has also amassed more than 100 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. It could be just days away from 90% enriched uranium, which is what is required to make a nuclear bomb. Experts estimate that Iran could produce weapons-grade material within weeks, and it can make a functional bomb, an atomic bomb, in just 6 months. Trump has set a 60-day ultimatum which is set to expire in the middle of June, and that leaves very little room for compromise. Israeli officials have also pushed for terms which include complete nuclear dismantlement by Iran. That is a demand which Tehran calls simply a fantasy. One of the senior advisors to the Ayatollah regime in Iran has publicly said that Iran's nuclear program cannot be rolled back. For Trump, the talks with Iran represent an opportunity to build a legacy. Having failed in his first term to secure a better Iran deal, he now faces a nuclear threshold state and also a Middle East which is on the brink. His affinity and friendship and close personal ties with Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, and his desire to bolster Israel's security further adds another degree of urgency. Iran, though, is motivated simply by economic desperation. Years of sanctions have almost collapsed its currency. It has also fueled domestic unrest. While Tehran publicly dismisses American demands for nuclear disarmament, its agreement to talk signals a pragmatic recognition that it needs sanctions relief. All the more so that only if these sanctions are lifted will the Ayatollah regime likely survive. And like in most totalitarian states, survival of the regime is the #1 priority. The 2015 nuclear deal, which was negotiated under President Obama, remains a political football even today. Trump withdrew from that deal and he exerted a maximum pressure campaign that eroded trust between Tehran and Washington. But Trump's current demands exceed even the limits that were achieved under the JCPOA. Trump was not satisfied with 3.6% enrichment in 2018. Now he's dealing with a nuclear program that is light years ahead at 60% enriched uranium. There are far lesser chances today than compared to Trump's first term that Iran will actually agree to put curbs on its nuclear program. Iran insists on indirect talks, which are a mirror reflection of the 2021 mediations where Europe had played a central role. Iran is keen that talks with the United States reflect its preference for what it calls a third-party buffer. Yet Trump is at the opposite end of the spectrum. He has a fixation on direct talks, which is a symbolic victory. It hints at a desire for Trump to claim personal credit if at all there's going to be any breakthrough between Washington and Tehran. Even as diplomats convened in Oman, the broader conflict in the region is simmering. The Houthis continue to target Red Sea shipping lanes. Hezbollah stockpiles precision-guided missiles, its ceasefire with Israel is broken, and Hamas has gone back to rebuilding its tunnels under Gaza. It has stopped exchanging hostages for prisoners in Israeli jails. Trump's strikes on Yemen and the Houthi rebels, and Trump's support for Israeli operations which are aimed at defanging these Iranian proxy terror groups risks entrenching Iran's defiance. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei's strategic doctrine hinges on these proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas, as both deterrents as well as bargaining chips. Abandoning these proxies would undermine Iran's regional influence. The meeting in Oman is less a negotiation and more a preliminary icebreaker. Trump's combative rhetoric and Iran's entrenched red lines suggest that the dialogue process is going to be long, it's going to be fraught with a lot of risk. Both sides have incentives to avoid war, but Trump faces other problems, including the tariff pressures that were announced recently. Iran has an economy that is teetering. The gulf between Washington and Tehran and their respective positions is as big as the Gulf of Persia.